The BOBO BWA. Masks, Earth, and the Sacred Order. Beliefs, rituals, and traditions. A people who refuse to separate the sacred from the everyday. Where masks are not costumes but living presences. Where the earth herself is the primary deity. Personal Reading Series May 2026 Allegricity 1.q Productions. Contents. Introduction. Who the BOBO BWA are. Part 1. History, Geography, and Cultural Identity. Part 2. Cosmology, Wuro and the Sacred Order of the World. Part 3. Do, the Supreme Force and the BOBO Universe. Part 4. The Masks, Living Presences, not Costumes. Part 5. Types of masks and their sacred roles. Part 6. Masquerade ceremonies and ritual performance. Part 7. The Earth Cult and the Sacred Covenant with Land. Part 8. Initiation, Crossing the Threshold into Knowledge. Part 9. The Dead, Ancestors, and the Living Community. Part 10. Sacred Objects, Shrines, and Altars. Part 11. Music, Rhythm, and Sacred Sound. Part 12. Agricultural Ritual and the Sacred Year. Part 13. The BOBO BWA Today, Survival and Adaptation. Part 14. Allegricity Convergences. Introduction. The BOBO BWA are a people about whom the wider world knows almost nothing, and that absence in Western knowledge is itself meaningful. They live in an area of West Africa straddling what is now Burkina Faso and Mali, in the savanna and woodland zone that has been a crossroads of culture, trade, and spiritual tradition for millennia. They are not a numerically large group, estimates range from 100,000 to 300,000 people, but the depth, coherence, and philosophical richness of their spiritual system is extraordinary. The BOBO BWA are most famous in the scholarly literature for their masquerade tradition, one of the most complex, theologically sophisticated, and aesthetically remarkable mask traditions in all of Africa. But to understand the masks, you must first understand the cosmology within which they operate, the sacred order that governs all of BOBO BWA life, and the remarkable concept of Do, the generative sacred force that animates the entire system. This guide will take you through the complete system: cosmology, sacred hierarchy, mask theology, initiation, death practices, earth cult, agricultural ritual, and the BOBO BWA understanding of the relationship between the human community, the natural world, and the sacred order that holds them together. For Allegricity, the BOBO BWA offer a living example of a tradition in which the separation between sacred and secular that defines so much of Western life simply does not exist, because in the BOBO BWA world, there is no secular. There is only the sacred, in different degrees of intensity and accessibility. History, Geography, and Cultural Identity. The BOBO BWA inhabit a region of West Africa centered on Burkina Faso, the landlocked country in the heart of West Africa bordered by Mali, Niger, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. Their traditional territory spans the towns of Bobo Dioulasso and the surrounding agricultural villages of the savannah. The BOBO BWA are an agricultural people, farmers of millet, sorghum, cotton, and shea, organized in villages that are among the most stable and continuously inhabited settlements in the region. Their village structures are architecturally distinctive. The traditional BOBO BWA village is built around a sacred center, with residential compounds radiating outward from the central shrine space, and with the layout of the village itself reflecting the cosmological order of the world. You can read the theology in the architecture. Colonial history and cultural resistance. The French colonial period had profound consequences for the BOBO BWA, as for all West African peoples. The French actively suppressed traditional religious practices, particularly masquerades, which they saw as obstacles to Christian conversion and civilization. Many sacred objects were confiscated, destroyed, or taken to European museums. BOBO BWA resistance to colonial rule was persistent. There were major armed revolts in 1915 to 1916 that were violently suppressed. Despite these pressures, the BOBO BWA maintained their traditional system with remarkable fidelity. The masquerade tradition survived, the initiation system survived, the earth cult survived. This persistence is itself theologically significant. In the BOBO BWA understanding, the sacred order is not a human invention that can be abandoned or modified. It is the fundamental structure of reality, and to abandon it would be to collapse the world. Cosmology, Wuro and the sacred order of the world. The foundational concept of BOBO BWA thought is Wuro, the sacred order, the divine arrangement of the world as it was established at the beginning of time by the creator god Wuro. Wuro is not a static set of rules. It is the living structure of reality, the way things actually are when they are functioning as they should. Disturbing Wuro, through improper behavior, ritual error, or violation of sacred boundaries, creates disorder that radiates outward into the community and the natural world. Restoring Wuro requires specific ritual action. The BOBO BWA cosmos is organized hierarchically. At the apex is the creator god, also called Wuro, the supreme, remote, self-sufficient divine being who created the world and then withdrew from direct involvement with it, delegating the ongoing care and governance of the world to intermediary forces and beings. This pattern, supreme creator who withdraws and walks through intermediaries, is characteristic of many West African religious systems and reflects a sophisticated theological understanding. The supreme is too complete, too self-sufficient, to be directly approached or petitioned by finite beings. The three realms. BOBO BWA cosmology organizes existence into three interconnected realms that must remain in proper relationship with each other for the world to function well. The realm of the creator and the primordial forces, remote, inaccessible except through specific intermediaries, the source of all sacred power. The realm of the living human community, the village, the family, the fields, the social order, which must conform to the sacred order to maintain its vitality. And the realm of the natural world, the bush, the wilderness beyond the cultivated area, the domain of wild forces, uncontrolled power, and the dangerous creative energy that lies beyond human domestication. These three realms are not sealed from each other. They interpenetrate, communicate, and require regular ritual maintenance of their proper boundaries. The masquerade tradition is precisely the technology for managing this interpenetration. Masks emerge from the bush, move through the village, and return to the bush, enacting the ongoing negotiation between the human community and the wild sacred forces on which it depends. Connection to holographicity. The BOBO BWA three-realm cosmology, creator/primordial forces, human community, and wild natural world, is a West African articulation of the tripartite cosmos that holographicity recognizes across traditions. The druidic three realms of sky, land, and sea. The Kemetic three levels of the duat, the earthly realm, and the heavenly realm. The hologric understanding that the practitioner stands at the intersection of above, below, and the present embodied moment. The BOBO BWA add a crucial specificity. The wild, undomesticated realm of the bush is not threatening to be conquered but sacred to be respected and negotiated with. This is the anomist recognition that holographicity honors. The wildness of the natural world is not chaos to be subdued but a reservoir of sacred power that the human community requires for its own vitality. The supreme force and the BOBO universe. The single most important and distinctive concept in BOBO BWA theology is Du, a sacred force or principle that is simultaneously the creative power of the universe, the animating energy of the masquerade tradition, and the ongoing connection between the human community and the divine order. Understanding Du is the key to understanding everything else in the BOBO BWA system. Du is the creative force that the creator god Wuro generated at the beginning of time and that continues to animate the world. It is not a personal being in the Western sense. It does not have intentions or desires that can be appealed to through petition. It is more like a fundamental field or principle, always present, always operating, manifesting wherever the conditions for its manifestation are properly prepared. Du and the masks. Du's primary manifestation in the human community is through the masquerade tradition. Each mask type is understood as a specific materialization or vehicle of Du, a form in which the sacred creative force becomes visually present, physically active, and communally accessible. The mask does not represent Du symbolically. It is a genuine vehicle through which Du operates. This is not metaphor or theatrical convention, it is the BOBO BWA theological claim about what actually happens when a properly prepared and properly activated mask emerges into the community space. Du in the cosmos. Beyond the masquerade, Du is present in the productive forces of nature, in the fertility of the soil, in the coming of the rains, in the growth of crops, in the regeneration of life after the dry season's apparent death. The agricultural rituals of the BOBO BWA are all oriented toward maintaining the proper flow of Du through the community's fields and granaries. Ritual error, moral failure, or violation of sacred order can block or disrupt this flow, with consequences that are experienced as drought, crop failure, illness, or social conflict. Do is the primary generative force of the BOBO BWA cosmos. It operates through properly prepared ritual vehicles, above all the masks, to connect the human community with the creative power of the universe. Do is not worshipped directly. It is maintained, cultivated, and given proper channels through ritual action. When ritual is performed correctly, do flows. When ritual is neglected or performed incorrectly, do withdraws, and the community experiences the consequences in the physical world. Connection to halagricity. Do is one of the most precise West African articulations of what halagricity recognizes as the animating sacred force that flows through all things and that can be cultivated, directed, and honored through proper practice. In Taoist terms, Do is the Te through which the Tao manifests in specific forms. In Yoruba terms, it is closely related to Ash, the divine creative power that is present in all things and that is activated through proper ritual action. The holigic practitioner who works with Chi, with prana, with the subtle energy body, is working with the same recognition that the BOBO BWA have formalized in their concept of Do, that there is a fundamental life-sustaining force that flows through the cosmos, that the human community depends on for its vitality, and that responds to conscious, properly structured ritual engagement. The masks, living presences, not costumes. The masquerade tradition of the BOBO BWA is one of the most philosophically sophisticated and aesthetically powerful in the world. To engage with it seriously requires setting aside the Western understanding of a mask as a costume, a theatrical prop, or a decorative object, and encountering instead the BOBO BWA understanding of the mask as a genuine sacred presence, a living vehicle of Do, a materialization of forces that exist beyond ordinary human perception, and a necessary participant in the ongoing maintenance of the world's sacred order. What makes a mask sacred? A BOBO BWA mask does not become sacred by being made. It becomes sacred through a process of ritual preparation and activation, a process that involves specific materials, specific prayers and invocations, specific offerings, and the transfer of sacred power into the object through the ritual agency of specialists who know the proper procedures. An unactivated mask is a beautiful wooden object. An activated mask is a different order of reality, a genuine vehicle of sacred force that must be treated according to specific protocols and that has active power in the community. The mask performer himself undergoes transformation during the masquerade. When a young man puts on the mask and its accompanying costume, he does not become a man wearing a mask. He becomes a vehicle for the sacred force the mask embodies. His individual identity is subsumed into the mask's identity. After the masquerade, he does not speak of what he did while masked. The experience belongs to the mask, not to the human vehicle. Sacred protocols around masks. BOBO BWA masks are surrounded by strict protocols that reflect their sacred status. Uninitiated persons and women may not see the masks being put on or taken off, they may only encounter the masks in their activated, performing state. The materials used to make masks are specific and ritually significant: fibers from the sacred kapok tree, specific pigments prepared with ritual care, specific attachments and ornaments that communicate the mask's identity and function. Sacred masks are stored in specific locations, shrines or sacred storage spaces, where they are periodically fed with offerings. The storage of masks between performances is itself a theological statement. The masks are not inert objects waiting to be used. They are living presences that require ongoing care, feeding, and relationship. Neglecting the masks is neglecting the sacred forces they embody, with consequences for the community that depend on those forces. Types of masks and their sacred roles. The BOBO BWA masquerade tradition includes several distinct mask types, each with specific sacred functions, specific ritual context, and specific aesthetic forms. The major categories are not merely artistic styles, they represent different aspects of the sacred order and different modes of Do's manifestation. Leaf masks, Do. The most sacred and ancient of the BOBO BWA mask types. Do masks are made entirely of natural materials, leaves, grasses, fibers, without wood carving. They represent the most fundamental, undifferentiated manifestation of Do, the sacred force in its raw, natural state, before it has taken on the specific forms of the carved masks. Do masks appear at the most solemn ritual occasions and are associated with the creative power of nature itself, with vegetation, rain, fertility, and the generative force of the earth. Wooden carved masks, sacrobandi and related forms. The iconic carved wooden masks of the BOBO BWA are among the most recognizable and studied objects in African art. They are characterized by geometric forms, circles, triangles, crosses, that encode cosmological information rather than representing naturalistic faces. The cross motif is particularly significant. It represents the four cardinal directions and the intersection of the human and sacred realms. These masks appear at funerals, initiations, agricultural ceremonies, and on occasions when the community needs to communicate with the sacred order. Butterfly masks, BOBO, are among the most visually spectacular of all African masks, large, flat, horizontally oriented superstructures decorated with geometric patterns in red, white, and black. The butterfly is sacred to the BOBO BWA as a symbol of transformation, the metamorphosis from larva to chrysalis to adult, being a visible natural demonstration of the death and rebirth cycle that the masquerade tradition enacts. Butterfly masks dance in spinning, leaping performances that are among the most athletically demanding in the masquerade tradition. Rooster/bird masks representing specific birds with sacred associations, particularly the rooster, whose crow at the rise of the day signals the transition between the night world of spiritual activity and the day world of human activity. Bird masks mediate between the above and the below, between the realm of the spirits and the realm of the living. They also appear in contexts related to divination and communication with the forces of the sacred order. Fiber masks, beyond the lookout, full-body costumes made of fiber rather than carved wood. The performer is completely enclosed, and the character these masks portray is typically wild, unpredictable, and comic, representing the untamed forces of the bush. BOLO masks run through the community, chase spectators, and perform in ways that deliberately transgress ordinary social behavior. This transgression is sacred. It temporarily suspends the normal social order to allow the wild forces of the bush to pass through the community, carrying away accumulated disorder and renewing the social fabric. Masquerade ceremonies and ritual performance. BOBO BWA masquerades are not performances in the Western sense. They are not events staged for an audience's entertainment or aesthetic pleasure. They are ritual operations, carefully structured engagements between the human community and the sacred forces that maintain the world's order. The community are not spectators. They are participants whose responses, offerings, and ritual behaviors are part of the ceremony's efficacy. The primary ritual context. Masquerades occur in four primary ritual contexts in the BOBO BWA year. Funerary masquerades are the most frequent. They appear at the deaths of initiated men and are essential for the proper transition of the deceased from the realm of the living to the realm of the ancestors. Without masquerade at the funeral of an initiated man, his transition is incomplete and his spirit cannot properly join the ancestors, remaining as a potentially troublesome presence between the worlds. Agricultural masquerades mark the critical transitions of the farming year, the beginning of the planting season, the first harvest, and the end of the agricultural year. Initiation masquerades mark the transition of young men through the initiation process, appearing at specific stages of the initiation to enact the sacred dramas that transform uninitiated boys into initiated men with full knowledge of and access to the sacred tradition. Purification masquerades appear when the community has experienced significant disruption of sacred order, epidemic illness, severe drought, unusual social conflict, or other signs that Wuru has been disturbed. The masquerade acts as a ritual purification. The sacred forces pass through the community, carrying away the accumulated disorder and restoring proper alignment with the sacred order. The structure of a masquerade. A BOBO BWA masquerade begins before dawn, in the sacred space at the edge of the village near the bush, the threshold between the human realm and the wild sacred realm from which the masks emerge. The mask performers, under the supervision of the ritual specialists who know the activation procedures, prepare themselves and the masks through specific prayers, offerings, and invocations that open the channel between the human and the sacred. The masks then emerge into the village space in a specific sequence, the order reflecting the hierarchy of sacred forces they embody. They move through the village in specified paths that trace the community's sacred geography. They perform in the central community space, interacting with the gathered community, receiving offerings, performing the specific dances and movements that express their character and function. They return to the bush at specific times, recrossing the threshold between the human and the sacred realms. The earth cult and the sacred covenant with land. Alongside the masquerade tradition, The most important element of BOBO BWA sacred life is the earth cult, the system of belief and practice centered on the understanding that the earth itself is a sacred being, that the human community exists in a covenant relationship with the earth, and that the continued fertility and productivity of the land depends on the proper maintenance of this relationship. The earth as sacred being. The BOBO BWA understand the earth not as a resource to be exploited but as a living, sacred presence that is the primary source of all sustenance and all life. The earth has specific sacred sites, particular hills, rocks, trees, springs, and crossroads that are understood as points of concentrated earth power, where the earth's sacred vitality is especially accessible. These sites are marked by shrines that are maintained by specific ritual specialists who are the custodians of the earth's sacred covenant with the human community. The Earth Covenant. The original covenant between the BOBO BWA ancestors and the earth, established at the time when the founding ancestors first settled in their territory, defines the terms of the relationship between the human community and the land they inhabit. The earth provides fertility, rain, and sustenance. The human community provides proper ritual care, first fruit offerings, blood sacrifices at the sacred earth shrines, and the maintenance of the sacred order that the earth requires. Breaking the earth covenant, through specific ritual violations, through improper disposal of blood or sacred materials, through certain categories of social transgression performed on the earth's surface, requires ritual repair. The earth priest performs specific purification rituals to restore the broken covenant, typically involving offerings of specific animals whose blood is poured on the earth shrine to restore the ritual relationship. Connection to Halagricity. The BOBO BWA earth cult, the understanding of the land as a sacred being in covenant relationship with the human community, is one of the most complete West African expressions of what Halagricity holds about the relationship between the practitioner and the living earth. The holygric earthing and grounding practices, the honoring of specific natural sites, the understanding that the earth is not a passive substrate but an active participant in the human community's sacred life, these are direct expressions of the same recognition that the BOBO BWA have formalized in their earth cult. The holygric principle that the body is the earth in miniature, and that proper relationship with the physical body mirrors and supports proper relationship with the living earth, echoes the BOBO BWA covenant theology. The earth's health and the community's health are inseparable. Initiation, crossing the threshold into knowledge. In the BOBO BWA system, full membership in the human community, with access to its sacred knowledge, its ritual authority, and its connection to the forces that sustain the world, is not automatic. It is earned through initiation, a formal, structured process of transformation in which the uninitiated person dies to their previous state of being and is reborn into a new identity with new knowledge and new responsibilities. The structure of initiation. BOBO BWA male initiation occurs in cohorts, groups of young men who undergo the process together, forming bonds that last their entire lives. The initiation takes place in the sacred space of the bush, outside the village, in the domain of the wild sacred forces that are the source of the knowledge being transmitted. The initiation process involves physical ordeals, extended isolation from the ordinary social world, specific teachings about the sacred tradition, and specific ritual procedures that mark the transformation of identity. The initiates are explicitly understood as dying to their previous selves and being reborn as new persons with new names and new identities. The knowledge transmitted. The most important knowledge transmitted in initiation is the secret of the masks. The uninitiated are taught to believe that the masks are supernatural beings who emerge from the bush. In initiation, the young men learn that the masks are performed by human beings, but this revelation does not destroy the sacred reality of the masks. It deepens it. The initiate now understands that the sacred reality of the mask is maintained through human action, that the community, through its properly trained practitioners, is itself the vehicle through which the sacred forces operate. The masks are not supernatural despite being performed by humans. They are supernatural through being performed by humans who have been properly prepared to be vehicles of do. This is one of the most philosophically sophisticated theological positions in the entire masquerade tradition. The revelation of the mask's human dimension does not collapse the sacred. It reveals that the sacred works through the human, that the properly initiated and properly prepared human being is a genuine vehicle of divine force, not despite being human, but through being fully, consciously, and properly human. Connection to Halagricity. The BOBO BWA initiation theology, that the revelation of the mask's human dimension deepens rather than destroys its sacred reality, that properly prepared humans are genuine vehicles of divine force, is one of the most direct ancient articulations of what holographicity holds about the practitioner's own capacity. The hologric practitioner is not pretending to channel sacred energy. They are genuinely doing so, because they have done the preparatory work, maintained the proper orientation, and opened the proper channels. The tetrarties in systems that feeling, thinking, speaking, and doing must all be aligned is precisely the hologric equivalent of the BOBO BWA initiation's preparation of the human vehicle. Alignment between the dimensions is what makes genuine sacred operation possible. The dead, ancestors, and the living community. The BOBO BWA relationship with the dead is not one of separation or loss but of transformation and ongoing relationship. The dead do not leave the community. They change their mode of presence within it, moving from the visible, embodied realm to the invisible realm of the ancestors, from which they continue to observe, influence, and be engaged by the living. The funerary process. BOBO BWA funerary practice is among the most elaborate and communally intensive in West Africa. The death of a significant elder or initiated man triggers a multi-day ceremonial process that involves the entire community, not merely the family of the deceased. The funeral is understood as a collective responsibility because the deceased transition affects the entire community's relationship with the ancestral realm. The masquerade is essential to the funeral process. The masks appear to honor the deceased, to escort them through the threshold into the ancestral realm, and to communicate to the living community that the transition has been properly accomplished. Without the masquerade at a man's funeral, his spirit cannot properly cross, and an improperly transitioned spirit becomes a source of ongoing difficulty for the family and community. The ancestors as active community members. Once properly transitioned through the funeral process, the ancestors become active, benevolent members of the extended community. They are consulted through divination, appealed to at shrines, offered food and drink at specific occasions, and understood as the primary guardians of the family and community's sacred covenant with the divine order. The ancestors are the custodians of Wuro, the living human community's most direct connection to the sacred order that was established at the beginning of time. Ancestral altars in BOBO BWA homes and compounds are the primary domestic sacred sites. They are maintained through regular offerings, through the pouring of libations before significant meals or decisions, and through the formal consultation of divination specialists who can mediate communication with the ancestors when guidance is needed. Sacred objects, shrines, and altars. The BOBO BWA sacred landscape, both the physical landscape of the village and the cultural landscape of domestic life, is saturated with sites of concentrated sacred power, shrines, altars, sacred trees, and objects that are understood as genuine vehicles of specific sacred forces. Types of sacred sites. The earth shrine is the most important communal sacred site, the place where the community's covenant with the living earth is maintained and renewed through regular offerings and periodic purification ceremonies. The earth shrine is typically a specific rock, tree, or earthen mound that has been recognized since the time of the founding ancestors as a point of concentrated earth power. Family altars, maintained within the compound of each extended family, are the sites of ancestral veneration, maintained by the family head who performs regular libations and consultations. Specific sacred trees are understood as cosmic trees, connections between the realms, and their fibers are used in the construction of sacred masks. Sacred objects are maintained by specific ritual specialists and activated through the same process of prayer, offering, and invocation that activates the masks. Iron and sacred smith. Iron holds a special sacred status in BOBO BWA culture, as in many West African traditions. The blacksmith caste is understood as a sacred specialist whose work with metal, transforming raw ore into tools and weapons, is a direct participation in the creative work of Do. Blacksmiths are simultaneously the most socially marginalized and the most ritually essential members of BOBO BWA society. Their products are required for every significant sacred activity, yet they are treated as categorically different from the farming families that make up the majority of the community. This both slash and status, marginal and essential simultaneously, reflects a sophisticated understanding of the sacred as fundamentally transgressive of ordinary social categories. Music, rhythm, and sacred sound. In the BOBO BWA tradition, music is not entertainment. It is sacred technology, a means of calling, directing, and communicating with the forces of the sacred order. Every masquerade performance is accompanied by specific musical ensembles whose specific rhythms are not interchangeable. Different rhythms call different forces, activate different masks, and serve different ritual functions. Playing the wrong rhythm at the wrong ritual occasion is not a musical error, it is a ritual error with potential sacred consequences. The sacred instruments. The primary instruments of BOBO BWA sacred music are flutes, drums, and shakers made of gourds filled with seeds or pebbles. The music produced by these instruments during masquerade is understood as the voice of the sacred forces themselves, not merely a human accompaniment but a participation in the sacred's own mode of expression. The relationship between specific musical rhythms and specific sacred forces is one of the most closely guarded elements of BOBO BWA sacred knowledge, transmitted in initiation and maintained with considerable secrecy. The knowledge of which rhythms activate which forces, and in which sequence, is the knowledge that makes ritual efficacy possible. Connection to holographicity. The BOBO BWA understanding of music as sacred technology, specific rhythms as activation codes for specific sacred forces, is the West African articulation of what holographicity holds about sound as a creative force. The hologric practice of toning, chanting, and working with specific frequencies rest on the same recognition that the BOBO BWA have embedded in their masquerade music tradition, that sound is not merely an acoustic phenomenon but a direct means of engaging the energetic structure of reality. The cymatics research that holographicity references provides the modern scientific confirmation of what the BOBO BWA drummers have always known: different rhythms produce different physical effects, different sonic patterns organize matter in different ways, and specific sounds have specific sacred consequences. Agricultural ritual and the sacred year. The BOBO BWA sacred year is organized around the agricultural cycle, which is itself understood as a sacred cycle, a participation in the death and rebirth process that is the fundamental rhythm of those manifestation in the physical world. The dry season is the season of death, the fields are empty, the vegetation is brown and still, the rains have withdrawn. The rainy season is the season of return, the earth comes back to life, the seeds sprout, the fields fill with green growth. Key agricultural rituals. The first fruit ceremony is one of the most important BOBO BWA ritual occasions, the moment when the new harvest is first available and the community formally offers the first portion back to the sacred forces that produced it before any member of the community consumes the new crop. Eating the new crop before the first fruits offering is a serious ritual violation. It is taking the sacred portion before acknowledging the source of the gift. The planting ceremony marks the beginning of the agricultural year, the time when the prepared seeds are entrusted to the earth and the community formally commits to each side of the covenant, to plant, tend, harvest, and offer properly. Offerings are made at the earth shrines, specific prayers are spoken over the seeds, and the masquerade may appear to call those blessing on the planting. The end of harvest ceremony closes the agricultural year and opens the season of intensified sacred life, the dry season months when masquerades occur most frequently, when initiation cohorts may be processed, and when the community's attention turns most fully toward the sacred order that sustains the farming year. The BOBO BWA today, survival and adaptation. The BOBO BWA today live in one of the poorest countries in the world. Burkina Faso consistently ranks near the bottom of global human development indexes, and face the combined pressures of Islamic expansion, Christian missionary activity, urbanization, climate change, and the political instability that has produced multiple coups and ongoing jihadist violence in the northern regions of the country. The masquerade tradition has survived all of these pressures with remarkable resilience. The masks still perform at funerals, still appear at harvest ceremonies, still initiate new cohorts of young men into the sacred knowledge that has been transmitted for generations. Many BOBO BWA who have formally converted to Islam or Christianity continue to participate in the masquerade tradition, a both/an orientation that the traditions themselves generally accommodate, because the masquerade is understood not as religious doctrine but as the fundamental social technology of the community's sacred life. The art market has created new pressures and new paradoxes. BOBO BWA mask styles have been highly prized by Western collectors since the early 20th century, and the demand for BOBO BWA masks in the international art market has produced both a thriving production of masks for sale and a black market for genuinely sacred objects taken from shrines. The community's negotiation of this situation, maintaining the sacred integrity of the masquerade tradition while operating in a world that commodifies its forms, is an ongoing challenge with no simple resolution. Allegricity convergences. Sacred order and the hologric framework. The BOBO BWA concept of Wuro, the sacred order that is the fundamental structure of reality, whose maintenance requires ongoing ritual action, and whose disruption produces consequences in the physical world, is the West African articulation of what Halagricity holds about the relationship between inner alignment and outer reality. The Holy Greek practitioner who works to maintain alignment between feeling, thinking, speaking, and doing is engaging in the same fundamental activity as the BOBO BWA community maintaining Wuro, keeping the fundamental order of reality intact through conscious, sustained practice. Do and the life force practices. Do, the animating sacred force that flows through the cosmos, that manifests through properly prepared ritual vehicles, and that can be cultivated or disrupted through human action, is the BOBO BWA name for what Halagricity honors in its energy and breath practices. Working with Chi, Prana, Nwaifa, Ash, or Do are all engagements with the same fundamental reality, the living force that animates the cosmos and that responds to conscious, properly structured human engagement. Masks and the practitioner as sacred vehicle. The BOBO BWA understanding that the properly prepared human being is a genuine vehicle of sacred force, not despite being human but through being fully, consciously human, is one of the deepest teachings in the global sacred tradition. The Holy Greek practitioner who opens themselves to channel healing, creative force, or sacred presence is making the same claim as the BOBO BWA mask performer, that preparation, proper orientation, and the maintenance of sacred relationship transforms the ordinary human being into a genuine vehicle of the extraordinary. The living earth. The BOBO BWA earth cult, the sacred covenant with the living land, the understanding that the earth's fertility and the community's vitality are inseparable, the ritual maintenance of the earth relationship through regular offering and specific protocols, is the West African articulation of the Holy Greek earthing practice. The earth is not a stage on which human life is performed. She is an active participant in the community's sacred life, a being with her own needs and protocols, whose generosity is responded to with ongoing gratitude and care. Ancestors and the living self-altar. The BOBO BWA ancestor tradition, the dead as active, accessible members of the extended community, maintained through regular offering, libation, and divination-mediated communication, converges directly with the Holy Greek ancestor altar practice. The BOBO BWA specificity that the funeral masquerade is required for proper transition also points toward the Holy Greek understanding that the living community's ritual action genuinely affects the condition of those who have passed, the boundary between the living and the dead is permeable, and the relationship is active and ongoing in both directions. Sound as sacred technology. The BOBO BWA understanding that specific rhythms activate specific sacred forces, that the drummer's knowledge is sacred knowledge because it is knowledge of how sound engages the structure of reality, is the West African parallel to the Holy Greek sound practices, toning, chanting, the use of specific frequencies for specific energetic effects. The cymatics principle confirms what the BOBO BWA drummers have always known. Sacred sound is not metaphorical. It is causal. The masks are not what we make them. They are what comes through us when we have prepared ourselves properly. BOBO BWA initiation teaching. The BOBO BWA teaches that the sacred is not elsewhere. It is here, in the earth under our feet, in the rhythms we drum, in the bodies we inhabit, in the community we maintain. The work of sacred life is not escaping the ordinary. It is preparing the ordinary, ourselves, our relationships, our practices, our community, to be genuine vehicles of the extraordinary. Grand Rising. Personal Reading Series Halagricity IQ Productions May 2026.